Hmm. Oh, there we go. Let me just fix this. I'm just getting the summary completed here. That should do it. Just typing rapidly. Okay, welcome everybody to part 7. One more. 7. Okay. Now everything should be fixed. And we can continue on from where we left off. We are now set back in Falador. This coming after the confrontation between Ilme and Gunnar, which led to the death of Zorya. And Zorya died because Gunnar, while trying to attack a demon, sliced into Zorya's skull. Ilme and Gunnar both blamed each other for summoning the demon, and nobody really knows why it appeared there. Ilme managed to escape by casting an entangle on Gunnar and running away. And Gunnar went back to the Wolf clan, confronted his father, Jarl Viljar, saying, we need to go to war. You've let the clans, the other fremmenik clans, ignore you, and they've lost fealty. You are a weak leader, and we need to avenge the death of Zorya. Viljar said, no, you're still a stupid little boy, and you'll follow my orders, to which Gunnar struck him. Viljar fell, hit his head on a stone, and died, making Gunnar the new Jarl, who demands the reunification of the fremmenik clans and a war on Asgarnia. That's where we left off. So now we're going to pick up Chapter 11. The 42nd year of the reign of King Radolan of Asgarnia, the 27th day of the month of November, Falador. Ilme stood before King Radolan like nothing so much as a scraped out skin as she finished her report on what had happened at the Wolf Clan settlement. He looked down at her, his brow heavy with concern. Why would he kill the Guardian? Radolan asked. I don't know, she said truthfully. She had been turning it over and over in her mind. There were so many parts of that horrible fight in the caves that made no sense. Why would Gunnar kill Zorya? How did Gunnar summon a demon? There is no path forward. There is no future for me. Do you not see what you've done? She swallowed. He was angry, desperate, I think. I think he had lost face with his clan because he was friendly with us. With me, she thought. I made this happen. Your Majesty, Master Endel said from beside her, we have hopes that Jarl Viljar will listen to our reasons, a generous offer to enhance his coffers and armory. We are to arm the enemies that seek to... What did he say? Radolan turned to Ilme. Make you all pay. You will all pay. You think you are safe in your Asgarnia, but we are coming. She hadn't made him so vicious, so violent. That had been in him, somehow, and she hadn't seen it. That was the son, Endel pointed out. The father has been very reasonable, and we cannot lose the Rune Essence mine. No, Radolan agreed. To my knowledge, most of our treaties have the payment of runestones woven into every exchange. Not only would we be stymied in our own defensive capabilities, every agreement we've set would collapse. He leaned over to where Valzen stood, the right of his throne. Dressed in a trim purple gown with a high collar and a divided skirt for riding. Any word from Pariah? Old Grandmaster Adalar had died several years ago, Pariah refusing to handle the runes. Pariah had taken his place as Grand Master of the White Knights, much to Valzen's benefit. A cavalcade of runes altars exploration. The cavalcade of rune altar explorations, and the one brutal fight that thawed the old spirit between the Black and White Knights. Thawed the old spirit between the Black and White Knights, my mistake. Valzen winced. Any day, your majesty, but... She bit off her words. Never mind. Speak, Sana, Radolan said. Everything is open, please. Valzen's eyes met Ilme's eyes, and the thrill of panic went through her. The boy sounds a little fanatic. He's, to be perfectly honest, The best use of our time and resources right now would be to claim all the treaties which require mutual protection and mobilize. Assume we are at war. Against the Fremmenik, Indel said incredulously. They don't have 2 runes to stack together. But they have your essence mine, Volz countered. We will have a shortage soon enough if we don't do something, and they will continue to gather more warriors. Rubbish, Master Indel declared. I have spent time with the Wolf Clan. Jarl Viljar is a man concerned only with what lies on his own oxhide, so to speak. He's not waging war across half the continent, even if he's ready to take my head off. But Gunnar might, Ilme said. She didn't want to say those words, didn't want to admit how wrong she'd been, didn't want to doom her friend, but she owed King Radolan an answer. Gunnar is the next Jarl, she said. Our plan was always to admit to the deception when he took over, to hope the connections we had fostered would keep him and the Wolf Clan friendly, and let Jarl Viljar take any shame from the grave. But that isn't going to work. He's furious, angry. I lied. And he was angry that the Guardian knew, and if he was angry enough to kill the Guardian, I assume he will make good on his threats. I agree with the High Marshal. Sooner or later, the Fremmenik will be a problem. Even so, Master Indil said, we have runes and rune essence to last us for years if we don't mind a little austerity. Gunnar's not an old man. Gunnar's not an old man, but he's not young one anymore. We could start over with his successor, whoever that is. Moreover, he's not Jarl yet. I still know a thing or two about managing Viljar. The door to the chambers broke open, one of the White Knight's pages running down the length of the hall, her cropped hair sticking up in all directions with sweat. She dropped to a kneeling bow before bursting out, Superior's scouts reach the Winter City. The old Jarl is murdered and his son has seized control. The Fremmenik chase them off. They say they'll wipe the scourge of rune magic from the world. Ilme swallowed against the sudden lump in her throat. She thought dizzily of Zorya, of the Guardian saying, You have stepped onto a path now, Ilme. You cannot fathom the reach of it. They had all made their choices. Indil cleared his throat. That does change things. But let's not ignore Gunnar Jarlsson. Let's not ignore Gunnar Jarlsson doesn't have an army to march against Asgarnias. They only know how to raid coastal settlements, and if things have continued as they were the last time I visited, the Wolf Clan has lost more than a little of their control they'd gained with our weapons. He simply doesn't have the numbers. And what if he gets them? Valzen asked. Then that is a problem for when the day it occurs, Indel said. He turned to Radolan. Going to war right now against the Fremmenik is a waste of time. All freshly crowned rulers sit on a precarious throne. You know that as well as anyone, sire. If you swept in with your knights, you will anger all the other clans. Or do it now and stop them getting ideas, Valzen added. Radolan sighed heavily. If we ride to war, what do we say to our allies? That we won't be pushed around, Valzen suggested. That we are weakened without the agreement, Ilme said. Perhaps Master Indel is right. If you go to war against the Wolf Clan, you're telling everyone our treaties are precarious. Valzen clicked her tongue. Not a lie. We can go to war with the Wolf Clan, Indel pointed out. We can't go to war with Misthalin and Ardougne. And who knows where else. He turned to Radolan. I should apprise Unaya and Sterkalis of this situation. If I may, Your Majesty. Go, Radolan said. He nodded to the page, waiting quiet as the foot of the waiting as quiet as the foot of the dais. You too, girl. Get cleaned up and go to the kitchens. He frowned, troubled as they both left the room. I want an account of how much rune essence we have, how many runes, who we need to watch if this doesn't blow over the way Indel suggested. What of Irithona? Is she in Falador? Yes, I'll find her, Your Majesty, Ilme said. bowing and hurrying from the room. Erithona was in the library, running a stiff copper brush over Rue's scales. While Ilmi walked in, they both looked up. "Any word?" Erithona asked. Ilmi started to tell her King Radalin needed her, that they were on the brink of war, that there were carefully phrased letters to draft and send, that Jarl Viljar was dead and Gunnar had seized the clan, but suddenly she felt as if someone had dropped a huge weight on her. All she could think was the demon plummeting straight down at Zorya. Tears flooded her eyes, and she passed a hand to her mouth. "Oh, sit," Tiratona cried, pushing Rue off her lap and guiding Ilmi to a chair. "When is the last time you slept?" Ilmi shook her head, not trusting herself to speak. Did it count as sleeping if you woke a half-dozen times through the night, your head full of death and your throat aching to scream or vomit? Rue crawled into your lap. "Your friend. Bad." He was trying to talk more, the words clumsy in his mouth. She scratched under his chin and clamped her teeth around the sobs, shaking her. She should have known. She should have stopped this. Erithona sat down and tucked an arm around her. Aziris came into the library, a bounce in her step. "You're back," she said. "Sorry, I was busy." "Not now," Erithona said. Aziris frowned. "What's wrong with her?" "Aziris," Erithona said. "You were just with Xanamaron. Did he not tell you?" "We were busy," Aziris said. Spare me your moralizing and tell me what's going on." "The Guardian is dead," Erithona said. "The one in the mine, and..." She mouthed the next word as if Ilmi could hear the faint whisper of her words. "The Jarl's son did it." I don't know if he did," Ilmi admitted, swallowing down the grief. "It was chaotic, and I can't believe he would have killed Zorya." "I told you they worship demons," Aziris said. "Do they do summoning?" Erithona asked. "I thought they hated magic." "It's the runes they have the issue with," Aziris said. And you've seen the great monster they tell everyone is the face of Guthix in their longhouse. This was always likely." "We never talked about summoning," Ilmi said. "He never mentioned it." "And you never mentioned being an Asgardian," Aziris said. "Who else was in the cavern?" Ilmi hesitated. "Me, Rue, Zorya." "And did you summon a demon? Did Rue?" "Bad friend," Rue grumbled. "Exactly," Aziris said. "Look, I know you're friends, or you were friends with him, but I knew him too." "As a child," Ilmi said. "You haven't been to the Essence Mine in 30 years. "Yes, well, he was a horrible kid. It's no wonder he turned out a horrible man." "Aziris!" Erithona cried. "You were a horrible kid too," Ilmi shot back. "Or have you forgotten?" She wanted a fight. She wanted someone she could scream at, hurl spells at, so this could all go somewhere that wasn't the knot of sorrow in her chest. Aziris regarded her, stone-faced. "No," she said. "I haven't forgotten. And I haven't forgotten either that you were a traitor once." Ilmi shot to her feet, hand reaching for the pouch of runes faster than a thought. Erithona seized her wrist and yanking her back down. "Stop! You were a traitor once," Aziris repeated more loudly, "and I know you're not going to do it again, especially when it doesn't do you any good." She sat down at last, her gaze level with Ilmi. "You still think nobody is watching you, but I know you gave up everything to be right here. You have worked as hard as anyone, maybe not on the most impressive developments. We can't all be brilliant." "Writing the same treaty 3 times isn't brilliant," Ilmi shot haughtily. Aziris waved this aside. "The point is you are sad. You can be sad, you can be angry, but you are going to have to remember that you are, and have been for as long as it matters, a wizard of Asgardia. And if that spindly Jarl's son is hurt that you have a higher calling, then he can go rot out beyond the edicts." Ilmi shook her head. That's not it. She couldn't help thinking of all the choices she'd made, all the assumptions that had set them tripping down the long paths they could never have seen the end of. Azirus threw up her hands. Well, I tried. He doesn't deserve your guilt, though. Only one of you is responsible. Only one of you responded to a silly lie with murder. You can't remake an air rune into a blood rune, Iritona said, a little primly. No, Azirus said, with a long sigh. Master Unaya sent some of her wizards to that experiment, and all they got was wasted runes. I mean, you can't make the Jarl's son into someone he's not. I don't understand how he could have killed Zorya, Ilmi said. Azirus patted her knee. I have some books you can read. Summoning's really not that complicated. I'm sure you'll work it out. Watching gods, Azirus, Itona said. Do you listen to yourself? I have to go, Ilmi said, untangling herself from both women. If she stayed here another moment, she was either going to start weeping or striking Azirus. Iritona, King Radlin wants to discuss the state of our treaties with you. I'm going to start checking our essence stores. Rue landed on her shoulder as she left the library, following the curvature of the staircase down the tower to the vaults in the deep levels of the fortress. Your friend bad, he said again. Azirus is Azirus, she said. She's an ordinary sort of bad. Wasn't she? Ilmi suddenly didn't know. She prided herself on her ability to read people, to know what they wanted and what they might do, and then she'd been so very mistaken. She'd known Gunnar was proud, that telling him the truth would be hard. She'd known if he found out on his own, it would not go well. He was hurt. He was humiliated. He was trying to protect himself from feeling like a fool, but she'd imagined he'd want to be reassured, want to be helped back to feeling settled. She could never have imagined him killing Zorya, not if he'd threatened to do it, not even if he'd threatened to do it 100 times. But she couldn't see another answer. There'd only been the 4 of them in the cavern, her and Zorya and Gunnar and Rue. She hadn't summoned a demon, and Rue couldn't have. Zorya certainly hadn't done it, and that only left Gunnar reaching for his pouch and shouting. She shut her eyes. That was it. She had gotten him wrong. That was the only real answer. Volzin was already in the primary essence vault when she arrived, scrutinizing the crates and piles of unformed rune magic. The vault itself was as large as the Wolf Clan's longhouse, even without having made the trip to the Rune Essence mine that year. It was nearly full. Volzin nodded at Ilmi as she entered. Any chance Endel's collection of books includes the ledger for some old wars quartermaster? Would be nice to have some sense of how fast we're going through runes. Isn't that why we have the knights? Ilmi asked. His Majesty pulled this kingdom's most of the way into existence before we ever had runes. But war makes people restless, she said. What happens when Karamja or Mistalin or the Encamdo find out Asgarnia's got an enemy? We don't know how many fronts this war will have. None at the moment. At the moment. Ilmi frowned. You sound excited. Excited's the wrong word, Volzin said, a crooked smile pulling at her mouth. I have my uses in Radolin's new court, ferrying messages to Mistalin and making placating noises at his allies. But the Kinshra and I are a lot more useful on the battlefield. I think Radolin would do well to remind everyone he hasn't lost that fire that made him king in the first place. She turned to Ilmi, something wild in her blue eyes that Ilmi hadn't seen in a long time. It's how the world works. Great changes are always upon us. Maybe it will all settle down quickly, Ilmi said. Maybe someone will talk sense into Gunnar. Maybe we will get the essence mine back without a lot of trouble. But even as she thought it, she knew that Gunnar wouldn't let his guard down among the fremmenik. She had been the only one he'd ever confessed his anger to, the only one he would have listened to when she said, "Let it settle," and now there were no chances of that ever happening. And that is the end of chapter 11. Give me 1 minute. Okay. Let's continue on to chapter 12. Where does chapter 12 take place? We are back with the Fremeniks. Give me 1 moment. Let's head over to the Fremeniks. Get a nice shot. We've already done the longhouse a good couple of times. Let's take a look at one of the longboats. Is that good? No. I want to find a nice shot that makes it makes us feel like we are with the Fremeniks. How about the front gate? That looks fine. Oh, no, misclick. Shush. Shush, Stella. Hey! You're okay. You're fine. Sorry, my dog hears someone out there. Yeah, this is fine. How long is this chapter? This is a fairly short chapter. Okay. Chapter 12. The 52nd year of the reign of King Radalin of Asgarnia. The 11th day of the month of Pentember. The Salmon clan's main settlement. The Salmon clan had no winter camp. Built along a river seeking its way inland on the far northern island, they dug their longhouses into the earth and built stone into their walls. The waters they built alongside were wide and freezing along the shore. As Gunnar's warriors rowed in against the current towards the buildings ahead, they eyed the people gathering along the shore, looking for a pale-haired woman of 30 years. Would they even recognize Thyra? Would he even recognize Thyra? What would happen if he didn't? What would happen if she turned from him? Gunnar squashed down those thoughts. Of course he would recognize her. Of course she would be glad to see him, glad as she could be, since the Salmon clan must be brought to heel, and he would give them a chance to accept the word of Guthix and the rule of Gunnar Jarl's son, Viljar's son. They were the last of the clans he would bring under the wolf's control. It had been easy to get to this place, one final clan, and so much sureness in his goals that he did not hesitate. That first winter of the wolf clan had been agitated on their preparations for the thwart thaw, full of whispers and anxieties and fractious agreements. When they had returned to their longships, the Falcon clan was waiting When they had returned to their longships, the Falcon clan was waiting, having seized their chance to strike at the clan weakening under the aging Jarl's rule. It had been more of a battle than Gunnar had expected, but his would be the long path, and with the memory of Zorya's death and the knowledge of Guthix's blessing, his clan had crushed their attackers and sailed on at to attack the Falcons' settlement further south along the sea. If he were aught, he would have killed them all. If he were Iago, he would have left the settlement to think about what it had done. But Gunnar, Viljar's son, had to be different sort of Jarl. A Jarl bearing the truth of Guthix. He would need every warrior he could muster, so when the Wolf clan had made it evident that the Falcons were not going to triumph that day, Gunnar had brought their Jarl onto a ship and laid out his path. The world was in danger. Rune magic had been eradicated, had to be eradicated, as Garnia had to be stopped. And if the Falcon clan did not see the necessity of this course of action, the Wolf clan would make certain they would not stand in their way. Gunnar needed every warrior he could get, but he could not risk treachery again. The clans that had once been bent to Viljar's rule, the seal, the falcon, the mammoth, they had been his first task. Bring them back under Wolf's rule and add their warriors to his tally. It had taken more than a few years, but now the Jarls who ruled them were dedicated to his cause, their warriors eager for the coming war. They had been at his side as they sailed down on the other clans of the fremmenik, the ox, the larch, the sturgeon, and all the smaller clans whose emblems blurred together. They were all the wolf. They were all the army of Gunnar Viljar's son. And now the salmon, fat and settled and unburdened by their promises to the wolf, 13 years neglected. The winter storms had been fiercer and stranger the last few years, disturbing fishing grounds and swamping fields. The small clans flocked to his banner, eager for solutions, eager for answers, but the salmon waited inland, silent and sullen, for him to come to them. This part was all ritual. The rival chieftain requesting hospitality, the receiving tribe declaring their strength and lineage, words that meant, don't underestimate us, don't test the bonds of hospitality. But even as they brought him into their longhouse, into their the heart of their power, with Gunnar's longships, his warriors, his ever-growing clan, they were only words. The Salmon Jarl, a man called Orvar Sigisdur's son, beckoned his warriors to dedicate their weapons on the green Guthix stone at the center. Gunnar watched as they waited in much the fashion he'd waited for tiny Thyra to finish a recreation of which berries were her favorites. This was the simple part, he thought, noticing how Orvar never met his eyes, but Gunnar was very ready for the difficult part. His own warriors laid their weapons on the stone, an acknowledgment of the truce now in place, a pledge to defend their hosts of the duration of the hospitality agreement. Gunnar rose last, knees a little stiff, and approached with his axe in hand. His father's face as his father connects, the hollow crack as it hits the stone. His father's face as his fist connects, the hollow crack as it hits the stone. Gunnar fought the urge to flinch from the memory as fresh as the autumn day so long ago. He set his axe against the stone and looked up to find Orvar watching him warily. Good, Gunnar thought. Will our daughter be joining us, Jarl? He said, all politeness, for Thyra's father-in-law. It was the least he could do. Orvar's nostrils flared. Thyra is among the fire tenders. I'm sure she'll be happy to see you, Jarl, when her tasks are complete. Great Jarl, Gunnar corrected, all mildness. I am great Jarl of the fremmenik now, Orvar. Orvar's eyes darted away. Of course. Word of your campaign has spread over the sea. The gift of Guthix, the necessity of crushing the runecrafters. But this is talk for after we've eaten. Please sit. As Orvar turned, Gunnar grabbed his sleeve. Orvar bristled at the effrontery. What would you have my daughter bring over my plate? I would with her. He sat again, looking over the warriors of the Salmon clan. They seemed hale and keen-eyed men and women, valuable additions to his army. He searched among them for hints of his late wife. Fiera's tilted nose, Fiera's curling hair. Had Thyra thrived among them? If she hadn't, he could easily forgo those warriors and leave the Salmon clan in their grave when he sailed away. Great Jarl, a woman said. A plate slid into view, and he looked up to the face of a woman with a pale blonde braid and pursed mouth. Her daughter's bright, bright eyes. Thyra. The word gushed from him like a sigh of relief. I'm so glad to see you. The same clan is grateful to offer you hospitality, she said back. He beckoned her around the long table. Zorya moved down. Thyra, come here, please. I want to hear how you've been. I want to know everything. Thyra's cheeks reddened, and she glanced backwards, first at the fire, then at the table of the Salmon Jarl. I'm sorry, I have duties to attend to. Nonsense, he said. I'm sure Orvar would rather we have a chance to talk. Sit. Thyra drew a deep breath, then came around the table, and climbed over the bench to take Fronya's vacant seat. It's been a long time, she said at last. 15 years. Life's whetstone had sharpened the girl Viljar had bargained away, and Gunnar could still see his curious, sometimes serious little girl within her. Are you happy? He asked. Which one is your husband? Elvis, she said, nodding towards the Jarl's table, and the wiry, dark-haired man beside him. A good husband? She asked. It's not as if I could trade him in, she said a little wryly. He's the Jarl's son. Gunnar frowned. You're the daughter of the great Jarl, he said. He should make himself a little more worthy. Children? 3, she said. 2 boys and a girl, she hesitated. You never wrote. Viljar. Has been dead a decade. They say you killed him. His father's face as his fist connects. The hollow crack as it hits the stone. He forced those memories down. Guthix killed Jarl Viljar, Gunnar corrected. Any who stand against his will should be prepared to have their heads dashed against the stones. Thyra studied him a moment, and she was startled to see not himself, not Friera, but a glimmer of his father in that frank, appraising gaze. Do you indeed dash Orvar against the? Do you intend to dash Orvar against the stones? We've heard the fate of the seal and elk jarls. No, Gunnar said firmly, as if he were sure, as if being sure could make it so. No, no, no. I come with offers of unity and friendship. I come to share my vision with my daughter's adopted clan. I'm sure Jarl Orvar will be glad to dedicate his weapons to Guthix's cause. Thyra said nothing, a moment too long. You think not? He asked. I don't know, she admitted, eyes on the Jarl's table. There are questions. People talk. They say your only plans are to make all fremmenik subject to your rule, that victories over the southern land is a fool's aim, that you are chasing satisfaction for a personal slight, and a man who would burn the world because a woman made him look stupid is a poor leader indeed, and the Salmon clan would be better off sailing into the ice. Gunnar's temper flared. Who says these things? He demanded. She met his gaze. Are they true? She asked. And when he did not answer, she added, It's Aunt Ilme, isn't it? Ilme flashed in his mind, laughing on some summer evening, Thyra on her knee, the sun low and the sky lavender, telling him stories while they watched the nighthawks loop over the meadows below. Of worlds beyond broken altars, endless fires and circling stars, and swamps that flowed from beyond time itself. Don't speak her name, he said. Ilme was nothing, a spark that lit tinder. Do not think about her. This is so much more than the lies of the Asgardians. Do you see that? Does the Jarl see that? All the clans are behind me, except Salmon. Thyra considered the table. He wonders why you haven't come. He wonders why isolate the Salmon clan. Because I, unlike some people, do not make promises I don't intend to keep, he said, fully in mind of the Salmon clan's betrayal of Viljar. I come here certain of my words that the fremmenik will destroy Asgardia and all its allies. She regarded him, her face a mask. They say you're still defending the mine. Gunnar gritted his teeth. The Rune Essence mine, the grave of the guardian of Guthix, was a sore point. He had collapsed it in the first winter, made it a monument to Zorya, and still Ilme's Asgardians crept in like ants seeking crumbs. Some summers they did not appear. Some summers Gunnar could not spare the warriors, and when they returned to it, the wizards were crawling over the mine, breaking through the rubble. Was it worth doing? What's worth doing is worth doing right, Gunnar said, biting back his temper. I have the army, I have the vision, I have the blessings of the god. He leaned in slightly. I have 300 longships and nearly 10,000 warriors. Let them excavate the collapsed mine. I am coming for something far more precious, and I would rather the Salmon clan be by my side than working against me. He drew back, added more softly. I would rather have my daughter by my side. It had been a long time, and there had been so many other people guiding her, changing her, whispering in her ear. How could he think he knew Thyra after all, when Ilme had devastated him so completely? Great Jarl, she said, I have 3 small children. I am no warrior. I am no asset in the battle you describe, she frowned, unless you mean to settle in the southern lands. She had always been a clever child, always a quick learner. He smiled, his anger fractured, crumbling under pride. I do, he said. Eventually. Will the Salmon Jarl join me? That is a lot to ask, she said, but maybe less so with 10,000 warriors. Will you help me? He pressed. She hesitated. Of course, great Jarl. But you don't mean to attack the southern lands now, with winter approaching. To begin with, he said, I intend to remind the settlements along the northern seashores that they are in the realm of the fremmenik. After that, when they think they have the measure of us, I intend to show them that the realm of the fremmenik is the realm of Guthix, and none are safe. What does that mean? Ilme in the summer, Thyra on her knee, words of endless fires and circling stars and swamps that flowed from beyond time itself. Simply, he said, we destroy their rune altars. And that sounds like a good place to leave it. Thank you, everyone who stopped by and watched. Again, there is a playlist with all previous live readings, if you're interested. And I will be putting together a little bit of a video after the book is complete to sort of go over it. Give a summary for people who want to spacebar through the lore, as it were. Yeah, so that's going to do it for me. I have to get right back to the Inferno, because I need to get my Infernal Cape, so that's what I will be doing. And I hope to see you soon for another live reading. Thank you, and have a wonderful rest